Today on With the First Pick, we're ranking the wide receivers in the 2024 NFL Draft Class. We know about Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Nabers, and Odunze, but who are some of the names to know as the first round unfolds? And even into day two, and we'll also give you some sleepers, what we're calling the Puka Spielman category of under-the-radar greatness, or Pascooter. Go. And to help us is our good friend, CBS Sports NFL Draft Analyst Josh Edwards. I'm Ryan Wilson. That, of course, is Rick Puka Spielman. And this is episode 135. Rick, what's the old countdown board say?
Yep. Hey, Josh, I know you've been on the guest numerous times. So my official role, and the only role I really have on this podcast, is to announce how many days left until the 2024 draft. And there are 38 days left, Josh, until the 2024 NFL draft. And if anyone can name a famous 38, please help me out, because I even had to Google it and couldn't find who was famous that wore jersey number 38.
Yeah, folks in the comments are great at telling us what the numbers are, but they're not helping us in real time. 38. Like, I got nothing in any sport. You got a 38, Debo? Is there a famous? Did Ron Jaworski wear 38 at any point in his career?
Josh Jobe comes to mind.
Oh, okay. There you go. That counts. He played in the league.
I looked it up. Arnie Herber was the most famous 38 in the NFL, and it looked like he played before there were helmets.
So you played him in high school? What's your scouting report on Ernie?
He looks a little stiff. Don't know how fat. He's a little thick through his lower and upper, kind of built like Pete Prisco.
Oh, okay.
So
low center of gravity.
Any vision of what 38 looks like? That's why there was never anyone famous in the modern day era that wore jersey number 38.
What are you looking up, Josh? What do you got?
Yeah, so I was looking at Pro Football Reference just to see their value over the course of their careers for the number 38. Eugene Daniel, Roland James, Bob Tucker, all the guys that just kind of roll off the tongue, jump right to your mind. The most recent one is Tramon Williams, who last played in 2019.
Okay. All guys except for Tramon that I had first-round grades on, incidentally.
So note to yourself, if you show up at the OTAs or rookie minicamp and you have jersey number 38, you're not highly regarded. And I will bet you no one will be willing to pay for that number.
You know what? I take it a step further. Caleb Williams should wear 38. He could be the trailblazer for number 38s everywhere.
That'd be illegal for a quarterback to wear jersey number 38.
Oh, quarterbacks? I thought they changed the rules where you can wear whatever number you want. Not quarterbacks?
No, you still have to be within the realm. Running backs can change to a single digit.
Oh, okay.
That's when everybody went to running backs, but quarterbacks have to be 19 through 0. 1.
All right, fair enough. By the way, we're making a jump to TV, Rick, but don't worry. Our regular YouTube and audio programming won't be going anywhere, but this Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time, you'll be able to watch With the First Pick on CBS Sports Network. That's right, on the old cable channel. Same show as you know it, just on TV. Help support the show by tuning in live. Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern. You can also watch us live on CBS Sports app or through your cable provider. So look out for that. All right, let's get to these wide receivers. But before we do, I want to talk about something incredibly important to me and to Debo. We talked last week about Tanner McKee and Marcus Mariota and how things didn't work out so well for Marcus. And it turns out things didn't work out so well at the other end of the state for another first-round pick by the name of Kenny Pickett, who, according to reports, was not happy with having to share snaps with Russell Wilson, who was signed to the vet minimum deal, $1.3 million, I think, by the Steelers. And he was shipped to Debo's Eagles. That's interesting. So let's start there before we complete the circle, Rick. 2 years in on Kenny Pickett. Last year he was injured. He didn't lose his job, but Mason Rudolph finished the season, won 3 games, and then got him to the playoffs. And it just never felt like, whether it was Matt Canada, the offensive coordinator, or just Kenny Pickett not progressing, that it was working out. Steelers are typically pretty stubborn in terms of moving on from players, and you just figure they're going to come back, roll with Kenny again. They hired Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator. I'll first ask you this. So one of the reports is he wasn't happy about having to share reps and OTAs with Russell Wilson. I don't know if that's true or not. There's also a report that back in week 17, when he wasn't fully healthy, he chose not to dress when Mason was starting the game against Seattle. Now, I don't know how much truth there is to that. But let's assume there is some truth to it, and you're a general manager. Does that make it easier to move on from Kenny, given the way he played in 2 years?
No, and you have to go back and look, and I don't know what was said to Kenny Pickett where they told him that he was not going to lose his starting job to injury. He got injured. All of a sudden, Mason Rudolph goes out there and wins 3 games in a row, gets him into the playoffs, and he does actually lose his job to Mason Rudolph, and just because of the injury or not, whether they spoke with forked tongue, I don't know that, but I think that irritated him a little bit. And then I think Coach Tomlin, who I have the utmost respect for, came out and said that, hey, we're not interested in anyone. Kenny Pickett, we're making all of our efforts to get Kenny Pickett and develop Kenny Pickett. Well, in the NFL, especially in the offseason, you never know. And to say you got Russell Wilson for $1.2 million, how can they pass that up? So then the question is Kenny Pickett or his representatives, I don't want to put it all on Kenny Pickett, looking a way to get out or not compete and go in there and see what you can do? And then all of a sudden you get a trade, which they said they weren't interested in, but for a 6th-round pick to get Justin Fields on that roster. And now you have Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. And I think the combined salaries for this year are under $4.5 million. I think 3.2 for Justin Fields, 1.2 for Russell Wilson. So how can Pittsburgh not make those type of moves? Because I think their quarterback room is all of a sudden better. I think these two fit into the system that Arthur Smith's going to run. It's going to be a run-heavy offense, build off of play action to take the shots down the field, like we saw with Tannehill when Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator in Tennessee to turn Tannehill's career around. But do you say, Kenny Pickett, you're looking for the easy way out to just go be a backup because you're not going to be competing for a starting job or Philadelphia? Or should you, Kenny Pickett, have just said, hey, I don't care who you bring in here. I want to get better. I want to compete. I want to show that I'm better than these two.
Hey, Debo, let me ask you as a resident Eagles fan, because there's a contingent of Steelers fans who are pro Kenny Pickett no matter what. I think Josh Edwards is one of those Browns fans that was a pro Kenny Pickett fan. Are the Eagles, what does Kenny Pickett provide, number one? And number two, if you're Howie Roseman, why didn't you just trade for Justin Fields?
I mean, just the cost of Justin Fields is a ton more than Kenny Pickett. You're not going to commit to that 5th-year option as a backup.
But you have Tanner McKee.
Yeah, but I think we saw it last year, like teams that have valuable or backup quarterbacks that can step in are worthwhile. And then you have like the Clayton Tunes of the world that just give yourself no chance. We know how important backup quarterbacks have been to the Eagles over the past, let's say, stretch it to 6 or 7 years now. But really over Howie Roseman's tenure, he tries to treat it like a quarterback factory. That's how they landed Jalen Hurts. So I'm happy with this.
All right, you're okay with it?
Yeah.
Hey, can I just break some news here too, Josh? Sure. Your Cleveland Browns seem to be collecting quarterbacks as they just signed another quarterback. They have 4 in the stable now, correct? If I'm not mistaken, they went out and got Jameson Williams, right? Winston. Then they go out and sign Huntley, if I'm not mistaken. And then they got DTR, who they drafted last year. So they got a glutton of backup quarterbacks. They must be collecting them because they went through 5 quarterbacks last year. But the one person they do not have is Joe Flacco. And in my opinion, the reason why is because as soon as Deshaun Watson throws a first pick, how many people are going to be yelling Flacco in the stands? And hence he ended up with the Indianapolis Colts as a backup.
Yeah, I think that was exactly the reasoning for why they did not bring Flacco back. I mean, they will say otherwise that was not part of their decision-making, but I think anybody with reasonable thinking will see that situation and they'll say, hey, Flacco did some great things for us last year. He was able to get us into the playoffs. So we don't want to bring that back into the building and potentially create this competition between Deshaun Watson and Joe Flacco. Everything that they have done has been clearly generated towards making Deshaun Watson the guy. I think some of the changes they made in the coaching staff this offseason or indicative of what they want to do with the offense. I think they were trying to lean into the idea of doing some different things, bringing in some new perspectives so that they can maybe get something out of Deshaun Watson, because right now that trade looks pretty terrible, to be honest with you, especially with everything Houston has done with it. So I think they are fully invested in Deshaun Watson, and they absolutely need him to be successful. So that meant that Joe Flacco could not be a part of that equation. Now, why they're collecting 4 quarterbacks, I don't know. I thought Jameis might have been the end of that, but then to go out and sign Tyler Huntley, I thought was a little bit confusing, but I'm sure there's not a lot of guaranteed money involved in that situation either.
You sound like DTR's agent.
Philosophy, why they're doing that. And
Why?
you can tell me, I'm just a scout in the corner, Josh. So I'm going to direct this to our general manager here on the show. Is if I have a glutton of quarterbacks in that quarterback room, and all of a sudden you've seen how many quarterbacks went down last year, and I can maybe sign those guys what I signed them for and flip them over for potential future draft picks if there's injuries, which we've seen, I think 66 or 67, whatever the number was last year, different quarterbacks starting in the league. Now they got a little corral of quarterbacks that maybe they'll be able to flip over for future draft picks as they get closer to the 53-man cut down.
Hey, Josh,
Which, to tie it back in real quick, I think is
ahead.
interesting with the Fields situation is why Chicago didn't hold on to him a little bit later, take him into training camp just to see if there was a quarterback injury. I'm sure you're still getting a 6th-round pick conditionally in return if you're not able to find anyone, but it just seems like they were looking to cut bait knowing that they're going to take Caleb Williams, didn't want any controversy in the building, but I think if they held out a little bit longer, they possibly could have gotten a little bit more in return.
But I'm saying this is maybe they didn't want to have those adult conversations because if you do draft Caleb Williams, which everybody's assuming, and I'm assuming that they're going to draft Caleb Williams, you have a pretty good quarterback room if Justin Fields is your backup, even for a year. Now, that may have been uncomfortable, and I saw Ryan Poles wanted to talk about doing right by the player, but at some point you got to do right by the team as well. And with the reports out there saying that, hey, we had better trade offers for Justin Fields, whether that's true or not, why wouldn't you do what's best for the organization? And then they took care of the kid. And so send him to Pittsburgh, where apparently he wanted to go, but for a cup of coffee. But with the way quarterbacks going down and a new quarterback coming in, and there's no controversy that he's going to have to compete with Badgett, or he's going to have to compete with, I think, Rippon, who they also signed as backup quarterback. So whoever they take number one, it's full steam ahead. But how do you have to try to balance out, I understand respecting and taking care of the player, but also making sure that you make tough business decisions too. And I give credit to Justin Fields and what the statement he put out, thanking the Chicago Bears, thanking the players and everybody that supported him through the up and down years that he had in Chicago. That kid is nothing but first class, the way he's handled this whole situation since he's been in Chicago and now with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
So, Rick, we talked in recent weeks that a 2nd round and change maybe seemed like a good starting point. That clearly didn't happen. Are you okay with a 6th round that becomes
Oh, my God. Yeah, where do I sign up for that?
No, if you're Ryan Poles, are you willing just to sign off on that so you can move forward?
Well, that's the question is that what's best for the Chicago Bears organization? And I give Ryan credit because he was looking for the best, trying to take care of the player as well. And I've been in situations where, okay, I try to do what's right by the player. Either, you're releasing them early before free agency starts, or let them go out and test the market, or bring them back, but when we traded Stephon Diggs, I wasn't going to give him away for a 6th-round pick. If we were going to move him, we had to get something substantial.
Hey, can I ask you about that? So let me ask you this, because Diana Rossini for The Athletic was talking about this on the podcast on Monday morning with Robert Mays. And she said if Ryan Poles had picked up the phone, and if Rick Spielman picks up the phone to say, hey, we want to trade Stephon Diggs, immediately you no longer have the leverage you may have once had if you wait for the phone call. Is that some truth to that in terms of how you do those things?
No, sometimes you're working with the agent, and it's if you are in the Diggsy case, we just had extended them to a pretty big contract.
Oh, okay.
So talking with the agent, and this is just in general, listen, we'll move him. But if we're going to move him, I'm getting X, Y, and Z, or I'm not moving him. He's going to play here. So
you make the agent do the middleman work.
Yeah, but not the middleman work, just so he understands, so he can relate to his client. Listen, you're not getting traded for a 6th-round pick. Now, I don't know what happened in the Chicago situation. And, Ryan, admirable that he took care of Justin Fields where Justin Fields wants to go. But, boy, Caleb Williams better be the be-all to end-all. And if Justin Fields ends up working out well in this Arthur Smith offense, and let's say, God forbid, Russell Wilson, who's going to be the starter, ends up getting hurt, and Justin Fields comes in and knocks it out of the park. Remember, Steve Young struggled in Tampa, all of a sudden got in the right system, right situation out in San Francisco. The rest is history. So I understand moving them. And I really love Caleb Williams, too. I think he's going to be a franchise quarterback, but you better be right.
Debo, please clip that. Justin Fields is the next Steve Young. Rick Spielman. Josh, before we move on and get to the wide receivers, and people like to do this in the comments, fast forward to 17 minutes, you can listen to the wide receivers. So we're going to talk about the trade first. Josh is a Browns fan. Is the Steelers quarterbacks room better or worse than it was a week ago?
I would say it is significantly better. I don't need to elaborate on that. Not only is it better from a talent perspective, but it is much more inexpensive, which allows them to do some other things as well. Now we're seeing that they're possibly interested in Mike Williams. They've been linked to Tyler Boyd. So they've got a little bit of financial flexibility now to maybe go make some other moves.
The other thing, and I'll ask you guys both this, and then we'll move on. And later in the week, we'll talk about the Vikings trade, and we'll talk about the mock draft that came out on Monday on the website. You can check that out if you're looking to see what happens in terms of the Vikings in my mock draft trading up after in real life trading up as well to get the Houston Texans pick. But I want to ask both of you this. Josh, I'll ask you first. So the Bears traded Justin Fields to the Steelers for a 6th and a conditional 4th. It becomes a 4th if he plays, I think, just over 50% of the snaps.
51%.
51%. So, Josh, does Justin Fields play 51% of the snaps next year for the Steelers?
I'm glad you asked that, Ryan, because I had been thinking about this. You're trying to figure out whether Justin Fields is your future now in Pittsburgh. So even though you've committed to Russell Wilson publicly, you still have to have an idea of what Fields can do for your team in the future. So whether it's 51%, that's probably right along the threshold. I do think we're going to see Justin Fields significantly this year. I will say that we do see him more than that 50%.
Ooh, all right. The Bears get a 4th-round pick, which still feels like a steal. Rick Spielman. Does Justin play at least 51% of the snaps?
I think they may have some packages for him, but I don't know if he's going to play because you convinced Russell Wilson to come. So he's not coming to Pittsburgh to sit on the bench. So I think, the only way he gets 51% is if Russell Wilson gets hurt or Russell Wilson just isn't playing very well. But I don't see Russell Wilson failing in this offense either because it's a lot more simplified, not like when he went to Denver with Nathaniel Hackett, where it's that West Coast, read 1, read 2, read 3, progression 4, get through it. He looked like a deer in headlights sitting in that pocket. Where here, just like Justin Fields, you're limiting, okay, play action, you're either taking it deep or you're coming down. So high to low, that's all you got to do. We're going to establish the run game, simplify the reads, high to low. If it's not there, use your legs to go.
All right, there we go. I'm excited as a Steelers fan. They may win 3 games, but right now there's hope, and that's all you want. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get to these wide receivers and see what Josh and Rick think about this class right after this.
Bracket season is here. Join the madness by playing the official bracket game of the NCAA. Get the CBS Sports app and be part of the madness.
All right, guys, let's start at the top. And much like the quarterbacks, this feels like a layup in that it's Marvin Harrison Jr. Josh, I'll ask you first because Rick and I talked Marvin to death. How close was Marvin to whoever your wide receiver 2 is?
Well, it ended up being a lot closer than I expected it to be when the season began. As much as I love Malik Nabers, I just think Marvin Harrison Jr. has a lot fewer questions. I think because of his size, his speed, his athleticism, body control down the field. everything like that. He checks all the boxes. So for me, that's why he's the top wide receiver in this class. Although there were a couple of guys that I'm sure we'll be talking about that made things quite interesting towards the end.
Who's your pro comp for Marvin?
So I went with Larry Fitzgerald, probably a little bit more athletic just because he's a consistent player, somebody that can, win down the field. That's who I ultimately went with.
I asked you first because that's Rick's comp as well, so I knew that he would get angry with that. Rick, do you want to steal Josh's take on why you like more Larry Fitzgerald's comp?
And as a teaser, we'll get into later in the show, he's in a tier by himself. I think the other guys are below him. I didn't put him in the same tier as I believe you two did, but we'll talk about that later. But I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is a future Hall of Famer.
Oh, my God.
We talked about it, Ryan, in September podcast. He needs to get his arse moving a little bit. Had a couple of drops and need to play with a little sense of urgency. And he did that and finished out the season as, like I said, maybe one of the best receiver prospects we've seen in a while come out.
I mean, the highest he could go. There's no chance he goes 1, or is there a chance he goes 1?
Oh my God, who's going to be quarterback?
Well,
your guy, Badgett?
I'm looking at your answer to Debo's question, and you put Chicago on here.
What are you talking about?
Did you miswrite that, Debo, or did Rick in fact respond with Chicago on the email?
I did. That was before the Justin Fields trade. I did my homework and turned it in my assignments last Thursday.
You turned it in too early. Okay, so how high could he go then? Just give me a number. You don't have to give me a team.
4.
No higher than 4.
3.
Are you just calling out numbers now? All right, 3. Josh, over under on 3 for Marvin Harrison.
I'm going to go over just because I do think that is going to be a quarterback landing spot, but I don't think he's going to have to wait much longer than that. 4, 5, 6. That's kind of the threshold for a lot of these wide receivers, depending on the movement for the quarterbacks.
I mean, does he get out of the top 6, Rick, in terms of the lowest?
Not past New York.
I don't think so. They have to take him there.
Yeah.
All right, that was pretty easy. Marvin Harrison Jr., special talent.
And how's he get past the Chargers at 5 with Mike Williams gone and then the Bears trading?
Because the Chargers are trading down.
Okay, buddy.
Let's talk quickly about that, and then we'll get on to the rest of this. So I just want to touch on this. So Chicago staying put. I would imagine Washington staying put. Hey, Rick, you've talked about this before. New England should not trade down no matter what, correct?
They got to take a quarterback, in my opinion.
So then if you're Arizona and you love Marvin Harrison Jr. more than the other wide receivers, you're not moving either, correct?
Well, the only thing I would say is they're still in rebuilding mode or retooling mode, and they made a move down last year, passed up on Will Anderson. I don't know if they do that again, but if they do, they're trying to accumulate more picks as they continue to try to build that roster through the draft.
So they have 4 and 27 right now in real life, and they could trade down. Now, if they trade down to 11, where the Vikings currently find themselves, then you have 11, 27, and 23. You could probably get that in part of the trade as well, in addition to whatever else you get. So you have 3 first-round picks. So at 11, 23, and 27, can you get a wide receiver at 11? I mean, Roma Odunze could be there.
Yeah, you can get Roma at 27.
No, I'm sorry, at 11. At 11 when they pick first.
Yeah, he could potentially be there, but it also can get all the defensive help that they need.
Right.
And I don't know what the chart is, but if you go off the Trey Lance trade on how San Francisco had to move up, that's more than just the 2 first-round picks Minnesota has. You're talking about future first-round picks as well if they want to try to go up and get whoever their next quarterback is off the board. Or the rumor, although it's just rumor, is what if they do both first-round picks and trade? I'm joking up.
Oh God, you almost died. Don't die before you tell us the secret.
Justin Jefferson in the package.
Oh, come on. Oh my gosh.
I don't know. You never know. Did you ever think that Pittsburgh would end up with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields in their quarterback room after the season?
All right, one last thing on that. Let's assume that trade is on the table. If you're talking about the Cardinals being in the conversation for that compensation?
Whoever.
Okay. Do you want to pay Justin Jefferson $35 million a year?
You don't think he's a generational type
I
receiver?
do, but compare that to getting Marvin Harrison or Malik Nabers, for example. That's the only reason.
Well, it's going to be a lot cheaper.
All right. That's why you're the math major. And I'm just the GM at the front of the room getting made fun of by the scout in the back there. All right, let's go.
Sitting next to my owner, Debo.
Sitting next to Debo.
And
So
Josh, I was in the corner with me too.
Yeah, Josh, this is like when the teacher says, don't sit with a bad apple because it reflects poorly on you. Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver 1. No conflict there. Number 2. I think we all agreed that Malik Nabers is number 2 as well. Josh, what do you like about old Malik there?
Well, I think it's just his body control down the field. That's one thing that I look for in terms of translating to the NFL. Somebody that's going to be able to win downfield. They can make the Cirque du Soleil plays, adjust for the quarterback's decision-making, all that kind of stuff. That's why he's been the number 2 wide receiver for me this entire process. But somebody that moves real fluidly, has inside-out versatility depending on what you need to do. Kind of a little bit like Justin Jefferson, the way that you guys were just talking about there.
Ooh.
So I think he's a really well-rounded player and somebody that would be the number 1 wide receiver in a lot of classes.
All right. I'm assuming your comp is the same as Rick. So what do you got?
So I actually went with Justin Jefferson, a little bit like a half step down below that, because I do think he's that good.
That's not your comp, Rick, is it?
No.
Okay. I didn't think so. I won't tell you my comp because I'm going to tell you my comp. I don't care. He's a faster Brandon Ayuk. Brandon ran a 4.5, but he plays faster than that. And I think Malik's going to run way faster than that. But I like his.
Better have a good pro day. What if he pulls his hamstring on his first 40 and we don't get to see anything that he does?
Third round pick.
Potentially. No, I'm just saying, could Odunze potentially pass him? Because Odunze was sitting there doing 3 cones until the janitor came in and was cleaning the turf.
Turning the lights out.
Which I love because he's competitive as hell.
Oh, gosh. All right. Who's your comp, Rick, for Malik?
I thought about this. I can't remember who I did earlier because I do comps all the time. I just keep changing them up. I like to go outside the box a little, Josh, on some of my comps. I'm going to go with Chris Olave.
He's thicker than Chris, isn't he?
I don't know. He didn't weigh.
The eyeball test. Okay. Chris was better. Chris is a much better player than I thought he was. I wasn't sold on Chris. I like Garrett Wilson a lot, but Chris Olave has been really good in New Orleans, no doubt about it. And I think so. Rank these wide receivers, Rick: Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Jackson Smith and Jigba in terms of the Ohio State guys coming out. If you had to take them, how would you do with them in order now?
That's how you named them.
Yeah, I think so. Just because Jackson struggled with drops a little bit early last season, then he came on, but
yep.
Olave was impressive when he was healthy. All right. The highest Malik Nabers could get drafted. What do you think, Josh?
I said number 5 overall. That's kind of contingent on Marvin Harrison Jr. going number 4 overall. Again, all of this is reliant on what happens at the quarterback position, but I think you're looking at 5, 6 there as likely landing spots for Malik Nabers.
You agree with that, Rick?
Yeah, I had 5, and then the lowest to me was 9th with the Bears.
So you did this 2 weeks ago. They've signed Keenan Allen. He is 32 years old. Are you thinking more edge rush here at 9 if you're Chicago and stay put?
It depends the edge rusher there, but again, Keenan Allen's older prospect, DJ Moore. They got rid of Mooney. Mooney signed with Atlanta Falcons. So,
yep.
Boy, if you had those 3 out there with whatever quarterback with you, apparently Badgett's your guy in Chicago because you don't think they're taking a quarterback.
Why would you take a quarterback when you have Tyson Bagent on the roster? Explain that to me. Why won't you say, Justin, they're taking Caleb Williams? Why won't you can say that?
I am saying that. They cannot take Caleb Williams. You're saying that.
Oh, okay. I was confused as to who was saying what. Josh, and you also think probably 9-ish or any lower than that?
Yeah, 9 was the mark that I had there as well. I think he could still fit in Chicago even with what they have done at the wide receiver position, but I do think it's probably more likely that they go in a different direction. I think even a Talise Fuaga there, you throw him at right guard and just really run over some people. I think that's another possibility.
The other thing I want to throw out here, I'm double checking, but I think they only have 4 draft picks right now. The Bears do. And the Bears have 1-9-75 is their next pick in the 3rd round, and then 122. Rick, would you think about trading down from 9?
Potentially, but if there's a difference maker there, get a difference maker.
Yeah. I mean, if Dallas Turner's there, you don't want to mess around and maybe hope around for Chop Robinson at the end of round 1 or something.
No.
Okay. Next up. Well, I'll start here. Next up, of course, is Rome Odunze. Josh, is there any chance that Rome Odunze goes number 2 overall, as Rick alluded to, if, say, Malik, if his leg falls off of the pro day next week?
I'm going to say
Not
no.
number 2 overall, the number 2 receiver off the board.
Thank you for the clarification, Scott.
That.
Thank you.
Now that is more likely. That is more likely that he's the second wide receiver.
Thank you for the clarification.
Taken in this draft class. I do think there is an outside possibility. I'm sure there are teams that have these guys ranked a little bit differently. I doubt it's unanimous across the board. I like Nabers as that number 2 wide receiver, but I can certainly understand why somebody would like Odunze there as the second wide receiver. And a lot of it's going to be what you're looking for at the position as well.
This feels, and Rick, you and I have talked about this as well, with the edge rush class and the wide receiver class. If you have number 2 and number 3 wide receivers ranked differently, that's not even, no one's going to yell and scream about that. And the edge rush class as well with Verse and even a healthy lot too. And of course, Dallas Turner, those guys are pretty closely clumped together. Before I get to you, Rick, there, what's your comp there for Mr. Odunze, Josh?
I went with a more explosive Michael Pittman Jr. The way that he was used at USC, I think he's got some of that flexibility. So I went with a more explosive Michael Pittman Jr.
Rick, which comp do you hate worse? More explosive Michael Pittman Jr. or my comp A.J. Brown for Rome Odunze?
I hate your comp.
Okay.
I just get paid to hate your comp. No matter.
I could have said Rome Odunze and you would have hated that as my comp for Rome Odunze.
Gotta hate that comp.
Is there let's say Malik doesn't work out next week. He's completely healthy. He doesn't want to work out. Are you having that conversation in the draft room where you might take Odunze before?
Yeah, I definitely am. Especially if he doesn't do anything next week.
Yeah, at his pro day.
Yeah, at his pro day. I am definitely taking Rome Odunze. Because
what if your wide receivers coach and OC love Malik Nabers more?
Good. Well, go tell me what he's going to run and go down there and see if he can get him to work out. Because if he can't, he's not even going to work out at his pro day. How's he going to? Is he going to show up? Is he going to mini camp? Is he going to like take a day off? What the hell? No, okay. I want the Predators.
Okay. And look, Malik he hasn't made any indication that he's not working out. I'm just giving Rick a hypothetical. So for the point of conversation here, what's your comp for Mr. Odunze?
I can't remember what I did in the fall, so change it up a little bit. How about Cortland Sutton?
I don't hate it. I think in the summer, my comp for him was N'Keal Harry because he played a lot slower in 2021 or 2022 than he did in 2023. He got a ton better. You asked him about that at the combine. We got a chance to speak with him. So he's certainly we talk about Jaden Daniels improving his draft stock. Is there a wide receiver that improved his draft stock more than Rome Odunze?
No, I think he made significant jump this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
How he finished the season? I think he finished with 4 100-yard receiving games and beat Oregon twice. And, give credit to Michael Penix Jr. for throwing a ball, but this dude took over games when the games were on the line.
Yeah, no doubt about it. What's the highest he get drafted?
Josh, I said number 5 overall. Again, it kind of depends on how you see this wide receiver class. Maybe he gets into the teens there, but I would say number 5 overall is probably the ceiling for him.
Yeah, that's about the range. I feel like, Rick, you mentioned 6, and then the lowest he get drafted, similar to Malik Nabers, 9th, depending on what happens.
That's exactly. Whatever 1-2 they come off after Marvin Harrison Jr., they're right in the same ballpark, in the same range.
So if Marvin and Malik go off the board, for example, first in the top 5 or 6 picks, and your team sitting at 11, hoping that wide receiver 3 falls to you, you think about trading up at all, or are you just going to sit pat and see what happens?
Yeah, no, Minnesota got that extra first-round pick so he can trade up and get Rome Odunze. What are you talking about?
No, if there's a team in that range that likes not necessarily the Vikings, a team that in the middle of the first round.
Maybe if you have him that significantly above everybody else, which I think he is. But I also know there's a glutton of riches of receivers in this draft class too.
Yep. And again, the Bears at 9 makes sense because they only have 3 other picks after that, or 2 other picks after they pick 9th. So that might be something to consider. depending on what else happens. And by the way, you touched on it, Rick, early on. Marvin Harrison is tier 1 for everybody. Our consensus is that Malik Nabers and Odunze are tier 2, even though I think Josh and I had them tiered out a little differently.
Yeah, we put them up with Marvin Harrison Jr.
I think these guys are close. Not as close as the top 3 edge rushers in terms of grades, but I think Marvin's clearly the best. But if you want to go in another direction and wait a couple picks, you don't have to trade up for Marvin.
Does anyone not have Marvin Harrison number 1 on their board?
Not here, but I think there are people that do.
Do you think they have Marvin Harrison not number 1 on their board?
I think some people like Malik a little better.
Okay, well, that's fine. Well, then their tiers are different than our tiers.
Josh,
your tiers are wrong.
Josh, this is called Monday with Rick. All right, now I mentioned all that because now we're starting tier 3. I'm okay with this being tier 3, and the first name up is Brian Thomas Jr. And we've been talking about him a lot because we had to watch Jaden and Malik ball out, and Brian Thomas Jr. was the beneficiary of catching all those deep passes from Jaden Daniels. Actually, I like this comp, Rick. I'm going to let you go first. Start with your comp for Brian Thomas Jr., and then we'll go from there.
George Pickens, when he came out of Georgia.
That's pretty good.
Big, long, physical, can ran fast at the combine, has some route refinement that he needs, but you watch him in the Florida game, you watch him in the Ole Miss game. Those are the 2 games that really popped. Compared to where he started the season and where he ended up, he's another one that really improved through the process. So I think this guy was my 4th receiver on the board after the others.
Let me ask you this. If he plays like George Pickens does through the first couple of years, is that worth a top 15 pick? Because George Pickens went in the second round, in part because he tore his ACL, and also he has some maturity issues.
Correct. He was a first-round talent.
Yeah. So if you get that kind of production out of Brian Thomas Jr. over the first couple of years, that feels like it's worth the top 15 pick, correct?
Yeah. In that 10 to 20 range.
Okay. All right.
First round.
Is Brian Thomas Jr. your wide receiver 4, Josh?
He is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was at the top of that second tier, third tier, however you want to talk about it, because he does have the potential to be that X wide receiver, that difference maker at the next level. Still a little bit more unpolished than a few of the guys above him, which is why he's in this tier below. But him and this next guy on our list, I think, are similar because they still have some untapped potential that could ultimately lead them to being one of the more improved wide receivers at the next level.
By the way, as I look over our tiers, Josh and I were in agreement on the tier 1 guys, including 3 names. Rick, you were the outlier.
Yeah, I only had 1 name, and then 2 names in tier 2, and now we're in tier 3.
And by the way, the tiers, that's just Debo's creation to divide us as a podcast. But the reality is, we have almost
they're clusters. He calls them tiers.
Yeah.
I call them clusters.
But the reality is, tiers or clusters, we all have them ranked in the same order, which is, put another way, they're saying a podcast with Emery Hunt where Emery likes to mix it up. Josh is just he's towing the line, which brings us to
I call it how I see it.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. I'm looking here. So, Rick, you think middle of the first round, like 12th, where Denver currently resides, is where the highest Brian Thomas Jr. comes off the board?
Yeah, I said the highest 12th, lowest 28th in Buffalo, depending on how the board falls.
The Bills
I
would
don't
be
feel be there. Buffalo would be, tripping over themselves, pulling a hamstring to turn that card in if he's there.
And then you also mentioned Buffalo as a possible good fit, as well as Jacksonville, who lost out on Calvin Ridley Jr. when he moonwalked his way to Tennessee. What's the range for you, Josh, on where Brian Thomas Jr. might end up?
I had mid-round 1, late round 1 as being the floor. But even saying that, I think it's more likely, mid-20s that would be the floor for him. I think he's just a really, he's one of the better wide receiver options once you get past those top 3 wide receivers, somebody that could be a difference maker at the next level. That's why I actually had the Colts down as a possible fit for him, just to give them a little bit more explosion, a little bit more size to go along with Michael Pittman Jr., as well as Josh Downs. Now you've got a little bit of a well-rounded group there in the middle of the first round.
Yeah, now we're still waiting for Alex Pierce to sort of figure things out. Rick, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm curious in your answer. last year we tried to talk ourselves into these wide receivers potentially going higher than 20th when they first started going off the board. And then they went 20 through 23. Jackson Smith and Jigba, Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison. Would any of those wide receivers be first-round picks in this draft class?
They would be behind the 3 we've talked to, or the 4 we've already talked about.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see where they slide in as we get through this, because I'm curious about that, because class was, Zay Flowers did some things. Jordan Addison did some things, of course. When Justin Jefferson was hurt, Quentin Johnson struggled, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, we talked about earlier, got better as the season went on. All right, next up, and again, we all agree that this is how with the number 5 name on this list, A.D. Mitchell out of Texas, who is same body type or similar body type to Brian Thomas Jr. I think he's probably a better route runner at this point in terms of doing the short and intermediate stuff a little better. They both ran blazing times at the combine. Josh, I'll start with you. What's your comp for A.D. Mitchell?
I actually went with George Pickens here, just because I do think that Pickens coming into the NFL, Mitchell coming into the NFL, they each have a little bit more to give, but similar size profiles. Mitchell, not quite the ball winner down the field as George Pickens has proven, but somebody that is incredibly athletic, similar to Pickens.
What do you think, Rick?
I went with Josh Reynolds, who with Detroit, really good route runner. I think big size. I think he got better, not blazing speed, but fast enough. I didn't think Mitchell was going to run as fast as he did at the combine. I think he's more build up speed. I still think he needs some route refinement. Still will like him a little bit more explosive after the catch. But I think that this guy has tremendous upside as well.
Let's see, the highest he could get drafted. Do you think he's the bottom of the first round guy, Rick?
Yes.
And you think he might even slip into the second?
Yes.
Okay. All that said, if he lands in Kansas City, they just got Hollywood Brown. I don't think that necessarily prevents them from getting another wide receiver. Him going to Kansas City feels like a slam dunk.
Yeah, that was my Kansas City mock at 32.
What do you think, Josh, in terms of the range where we might see A.D. Mitchell hear his name called?
I think it's more likely that he goes at the end of round 1. I do think his ceiling is a little bit higher. He could possibly get into the early 20s because of what he did at the combine. Just that combination of size and speed is tough to find once you get to this point in the draft, especially once those first 3 options are off the board. And I wouldn't be surprised if some teams liked him a little bit more than Brian Thomas. So for me, I think early 20s is very much in play for him.
Yeah, my mock draft that came out on the old website on Monday, I had him going 28th to the Bills. With this wide receiver that we're going to talk about next, still on the board, Keon Coleman, Michigan State transfer, has some return ability, ran the 4.61, then was the fastest timed wide receiver in the gauntlet drill where he didn't drop a single pass and looked crisp in his route running. Let's start here, Rick. 4.61 versus fastest timed gauntlet drill. How do you talk about that in the draft meetings?
Because he plays faster than his time speed. And so remember what you see on tape and go off of that. So, and that's great that they added that GPS tracking system, because that may have saved him on how fast he was moving through that gauntlet drill. And guys sometimes play faster from a football standpoint than they do just running a straight 40. So 40 is important, but how they play and how fast they are when they're playing. It's like Puka. We talked about that, where he didn't run fast at the combine, but he sure in the heck plays faster than he runs. So
if Keon has a Puka-like season or even a good season, your new name will now become Puka Keon Spielman. So should keep adding names as these guys get through it. What about you? Oh, wait, give me your comp, and then I'll get Josh's comp on Keon Coleman.
All right. When he ran the 4.61, and I put a healthy Cedric Tillman when he came out, if he would have came out 2 years ago, he was hurt, because I think he's a big physical receiver. I don't think he's a little tight. He can win the contested balls. He can make all those jump ball catches and contested touches down the field. But I think he has a little tightness getting into and out of his cuts.
What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I like that comp. I thought he was a little bit more bendy, more fluid. I went with Allen Robinson for my comp for him. I had late round 1, mid round 2 is kind of where we expect him to come off the board. And the Bills I had down as a possible option after they moved on from Gabe Davis.
I had him going 32nd to the Chiefs in my mock draft that came out Monday. I like the idea of him and Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce. I think you could put any wide receiver in that offense, and then suddenly you feel great about their chances of having success early on. Rashee struggled early, but then certainly put it together down the stretch. But to Rick's point, the fact that they had the tracking data is probably helps out Keon Coleman, because are you dropping him in your buckets, your tiers?
No.
So you leave him alone, right?
No, although I may put Mitchell just ahead of him slightly as we go back and get into our April meetings. I know this will be between him and Mitchell. I think those are the next two guys. And the one thing it's incredible is all these guys are big guys. I mean, even Nabers is not a 5'7" or 5'8" slot guy.
No,
they're big guys that are physical receivers. And to me, I had Keon Coleman best fit Buffalo. And then Mitchell was Kansas City for me. But teams that play in those cold weather games, especially later in the season, these big physical guys seem to thrive in those situations.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hit our tier 4 guys as well as some sleepers, and then get Rick's top 10 wide receivers of the past 5 classes, plus this one right after this. All right. Might be listed as tier 4, but these are some good players. Starts off Ladd McConkey. One of my favorite players of this class. We've been talking about him since the fall. And, oh my gosh, Rick, I actually don't hate these comps for Ladd McConkey. Wide receiver out of Georgia, had a great season, had a good Senior Bowl, tore up his pro day, and had a good combine. I don't know what else you need the young man to do. Maybe gain 15 pounds if that's what you're into. But, Rick, lead with your comp for Ladd, because, I mean, they're pretty good.
Yeah, I went with Deontay Johnson, who's now in Carolina. And I also went with Amon-Ra St. Brown, a faster version of Amon-Ra St. Brown, because of his route running ability.
Why were both those guys? I think Amon-Ra was too. Amon-Ra may have been a 4th round pick. Why were they 3rd rounders in that range?
I believe Deontay came out of Western Michigan.
Toledo.
And then I was at Ross St. Brown's pro day, and he ran 4.65 to 4.7 when he came out. I was at that pro day out at USC, and good football player. But we didn't have the GPS tracking system back then. And if you're going to run that, you're going to drop in the draft.
Yeah, so he may have gone in the 4th round. And Deontay ran to the 4.5s. I do remember that, although he plays much faster than that. You were shaking your head, Josh. Was that one of your comps?
So I actually started on Deontay Johnson, and then I went with Emmanuel Sanders because he's got a little bit more of the body type. But
good. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I think Ladd McConkey is just a great route runner, somebody that has really won me over the course of the year. When the year started, I was not the biggest Ladd McConkey fan. I know there were people out there that were. I was not one of them. But over the course of the year, I mean, you just kind of fall in love with the way that he runs routes, the way he separates, he gets open. And for those reasons, I went with Emmanuel Sanders.
By the way, if his name's Bob Johnson, he's a 7th round pick. He has a great name to be drafted early as well. So, shout out to his parents for not naming him Bob. So, Rick, it sounds like you think he might sneak into the back end of the 1st round.
I think he'd be a great fit in Kansas City. I don't think he goes higher than Kansas City. I think the big guys will come off first, but he's not going to go past the top 10 in the 2nd round. All
right. Knowing nothing other than these guys are going to get drafted, and I'll let you pick the player. Who has the most productive? I don't think we've done Ladd McConkey yet. Who has the most productive rookie season? Ladd, AD, or Keon?
Depends what system Ladd's in. So
that's not an answer.
I'm going to go with upside. I'm going to go with Mitchell. Coleman because I'm all with the size guys, but I think Lad McConkie could be a Zay Flowers type production if he's put in a slot.
So if you know that, why don't you take him if you're the Buffalo Bills, for example? And they may. I'm just saying.
Yeah, who knows? That's where you have these discussions right now. I'm going to go with a more bigger physical receiver with a higher upside.
Josh, you mentioned that
and
you weren't.
didn't, if I'm not mistaken, didn't Buffalo just sign Curtis Samuel?
Yeah.
So that answers that question.
Well, if they move on from Stephon Diggs, though, they may still want to restock the cupboard. What are you making faces for?
They're not going to trade Stephon Diggs.
Says the guy who traded Stephon Diggs. Got him, Josh. Got him.
Not this year. Not this late in the game. All right.
Josh, you said you weren't a huge Lad McConkey guy early on, and you came around on him. Would you take him in the bottom half of the first round?
Personally, no, but I do think late round 1 is kind of that range for him. Even into the mid second round, I think is probably the sweet spot. Steelers actually are a team that I had down as a potential fit for Lad McConkey. Going with George Pickens. I mean, Deontay Johnson has moved on, so they got to get somebody that's going to be able to work underneath.
Why are you shaking your head? You said Deontay Johnson as the comp.
Yeah, but I'm just saying they better get someone at center to block. So if they don't take Jackson Powers Johnson with their first pick, he's
not. I'm assuming Josh isn't meaning at 20. You're not taking Lad at 20. They pick again at 51.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a no-brainer.
Okay.
I thought you were talking about it 20. You guys aren't clear. You guys got to be clear on the points you're trying to make on the show.
You're too busy daydreaming about you and Jackson Powers Johnson shared a moment. You missed that. You missed that guy. All right. Next up, the fastest man on planet Earth, Xavier Worthy, ran the 4.21, which immediately prompted everyone, myself included, to put him at 32 to go.
Not me.
Not Rick. And they got Hollywood Brown, so they basically got Xavier Worthy already. They don't need 2 Xavier Worthys, I don't think. Josh, what is your comp for Xavier Worthy, who I believe weighed about 166 at the combine, so the undersized stuff is going to be an issue, even though he plays, in my mind, much tougher than that.
Yeah, and he's not just a speed merchant. I mean, he is a guy that is a pretty good football player. I had Darnell Mooney as my comp for Xavier Worthy, signed with the Falcons this offseason. I think if you look at Dallas and moving on from Michael Gallup this offseason, get a little bit more speed into that room there with Brandon Cooks, CeeDee Lamb, I think they have bigger needs, but that would be an interesting fit.
Yeah, my latest mock draft, things worked out where Rick's guy, Jackson Powers Johnson, actually lasted till the Cowboys were on the clock. The Cowboys should knock over people to get to the podium if he's there, but I understand what you're talking about with the wide receivers. Josh, you think Xavier Worthy makes his way into the first round?
I personally would not, but at the end of the day, it would not surprise me just because some teams do fall in love with speed. But the size is concerning. I mean, you can't overlook that. So as much as we talk about the size, I mean, relative to body mass, I think Adonai Mitchell probably ran a better 40 time when you talk about how much he weighs and everything once you take that into consideration. But I do think there are some teams that are going to look at that 40-yard dash time and see a good enough player and talk themselves into him.
Yeah, Rick, Adonai Mitchell outweighed Xavier Worthy by, I think, 40 pounds and ran a tenth of a second slower, or whatever it was, 1.15 seconds slower. Are you taking Xavier Worthy in the first round?
No.
Okay. Who's your comp?
Jameson Williams.
And Jameson, obviously, James.
I say that is because of the speed. Jameson's a little thicker.
Yeah.
But the thing I have is some of the drops, contested catch situations. Now, if he's by you, there's no question. I think he goes down too easy on contact after the catch. But from a speed element and what Jameson Williams did for Alabama when he transferred from Ohio State, Worthy can do that. But Jameson Williams has yet to show that he is a number 1 or number 2 yet.
And Jameson was coming off that ACL his first year, so that maybe stunted his growth a little bit. Didn't do a whole lot last year either, for being honest. So your range for Lad McConkey is 32 to about top 10 in the second round, 32nd overall. And then your range for Xavier is about 28th overall to top 5. But if you're on the clock, are you taking Lad or Xavier?
Well, we didn't have that meeting yet.
I'm taking Lad. I'm the GM. You're the scout in the back of the corner. The answer is Lad.
I would agree. Sorry.
All right. Next up, Another Xavier, back to back Xaviers. And again, we talked about Odunze helping himself. Maybe there's competition for Odunze. I maybe spoke too quickly. Xavier Legette, he was on no one's radar until we saw the UNC game in week 1, and he suddenly popped. And Rick, you said, who's number 17? And we kept watching him, and he kept getting better. Another big, strong, fast wide receiver. Spencer Rattler's go-to guy, especially after they lost one of their other receivers in the Georgia game. Xavier Legette. I'll start with you, Josh. Do you have a comp for Xavier?
You know what? This is the one that I did not have a comp for, just because I felt like I would have been forcing anybody I put into this situation. So I'm kind of curious to hear who you guys had.
All right, Rick, let's go. You have a former first-round pick that didn't quite pan out, but coming out, everyone liked him.
Kenny Britt.
Yeah.
Was mine when he came out. Was he Rutgers, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
So the one thing that he just has to prove is, he can go down the field. He can go get the ball, but he has to become more polished as a route runner, more polished as a receiver. A little bit of a one-year wonder. We saw that with Hyatt last year, but this guy's a bigger version of Hyatt. They can go get the ball down the field and can really run, but he needs a lot of polish for the nuances of playing receiver at the next level.
Which is why you have a mid-second to mid-third rounder?
Yeah, I don't think he'll go in the third. I think he'll go in the second.
Okay.
But the worst is mid-third, but I don't see that. I just put that in there because I was trying to get my homework done by Thursday.
Okay. Well, it's important to not just fill out the blanks. It's important to be able to support your answers, Rick. This is
Do not support I did not just fill out the blanks.
Tampa Bay is a team you mentioned as a fit. I'm assuming that's just you're not being forced into action. You can learn behind Mike Evans, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but then they release. I thought they released one of their receivers. I can't recall.
Let's see.
But I do see him as Mike Evans and fitting into that offensive system.
They still have Chris Godwin and Trey Palmer.
Gage, did they let go of Gage?
I think they may have let go of Russ a while ago, but yeah. So they still obviously there's still slots that need to be filled. So I get that. And then Josh, in terms of the draft range, you think it's first rounder?
No, I had mid-round 2 to mid-round 3.
Okay.
Not to steal Rick's answer, but I also like the Ravens just because he does have that thick lower body. So when you're looking at a team that is leaning on the run game now with Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, having the size on the boundary to be able to seal some of those lanes, I think is going to be intriguing, especially for Todd Monken, who I think has shown an ability to adapt to the personnel he has in the system.
And finally, if I love Lad McConkey, Rick loves this young man just as much, if not more. So, Rick, I'll come to you first. Florida, by way of Arizona State, Ricky Pearsall. Again, great Senior Bowl, good Senior Bowl, really good combine, really good season. They changed quarterbacks, of course. They AR5 that since moved on to Indianapolis. Played with Graham Mertz last year. Who's your comp for Ricky? And then you can tell me why you like him so much.
Oh, boy. This one I reached a little bit because I was trying to find. I don't know if he's as polished of a route runner, but I think he's a good route runner. Jackson Smith and Jigba.
I don't hate it.
It was the only thing that popped into my head. I think can go as high as the top 15 in the second or the top of the third. But I just love this kid's competitiveness. I think he had the highlight catch of the year, if that was him in the Florida game that went up, made the one-hander between everybody. I just think this guy's a good football player, and he tested well, and I think that really helped his draft stock. The Senior Bowl helped him, and I think this guy's got a chance to be a really good player and a starter in this league.
You say top 15 in the second, like midway through the second to the third round. I think closer to 2 than 3. Sounds about right? Yeah. What do you think, Josh?
I think second round is probably the ceiling for him. I think it's more likely that he does get into that third round range. Just an incredibly savvy route runner, somebody that has sure hands, was really reliable for Florida this year in chain moving situations. Again, another one of those guys that I grew to appreciate a lot more over the course of the year because I didn't quite see the consistency, the separation, everything that I wanted to last year when Anthony Richardson was there. And I thought this year you really saw him kind of come into his own as a wide receiver.
Yeah, no, I agree. Fun player.
And he ran faster. He ran faster. I know I talked about this on a previous podcast with Rick because I didn't think he was going to run that fast. He did. I mean, he more than checked that box. So to his credit, he was a combine winner for me.
All right. That's all Ricky Pearsall, tier 4. He only made it on one of our tiers, it looks like. I was misinformed. That's on me, Rick. You had Ricky, but now Josh and I are going to talk about the guys that made it on our tier 4, our final tier. 2 Washington guys, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, and of course, Odunze, along with the 2 tight ends who have a chance to get drafted, the best offensive line in the country. Maybe that has something to do with Michael Penix Jr.'s success. I don't think that's solely it. I think Michael certainly helped himself, but that's one of the storylines. So, Josh, I'll come to you first. Let's talk about the Jalens, McMillan, and Polk, and you can go anywhere you want with this.
Well, McMillan, I thought, was somebody that in a smaller sample size still showed quite a bit this year because he did battle an injury throughout the course of this year. You've got to fight to get some targets in that offense with Odunze and Jalen Polk as well. But I think McMillan is a good route runner. I think he's somebody that can separate at all 3 levels. So to me, I thought he looked a little like Van Jefferson. In my comp, I think he's probably top 50, top 75, somewhere in that range, similar to Jalen Polk. So,
yeah, I'll give you my comp for Jalen McMillan. And you mentioned he struggled with injuries, and that, was the reason he didn't play quite nearly as much. And Rick, here's what we'll do. So who was your comp again for Jalen McMillan, Josh?
Van Jefferson.
Van Jefferson. So Rick, you can be the final judge of who has the best comp. We should do this blindly.
Josh wins.
That's why we should do it blindly. So Van Jefferson versus my comp was Khalil Shakir.
Way to go, Josh.
And Khalil took a few years for him to come into his own, but he's a pretty important part of that offense last year in Buffalo. We'll see. It's just trying to get there. I'm not exactly sure what Khalil did at his pro day height weight wise, but Jalen was 6'1", 197, 10-inch hands, ran a 4.47. All those things sort of checked out when you saw him play when he was healthy. And then Polk, who was he was the number 2 guy there after Odunze and did a lot of heavy lifting. Similar height, weight, ran a 4.52, but he had a 37.5-inch vertical. I have zero concerns about Jalen Polk being a really good receiver at the next level. Josh, do you have them ranked similarly in terms of when they go off the board, or one higher than the other that's noticeable enough to worth talking about?
No, I have them coming off the board in a similar range. I noticed that Rick is grasping that stress ball a little bit more now that we're talking about comps here. So I'm trying not to rattle him too much. For me, I had Jacoby Myers for Jalen Polk.
You want to hear mine, or you want to wait on that first, Rick?
No, I get to be the judge. Go ahead.
Yeah, I went old school on this one because this was a tough comp for me. And actually, I'll check, but I think they probably tested similarly. I went with Brandon Lloyd. Contortionist in the air. So Brandon Lloyd versus, what's your comp again, Josh?
Jacoby Myers.
Jacoby Myers, yeah.
Okay, I like mine better than both of yours.
All right, well, let's get to your comps. Do you have comps for both Polk and McMillan?
Yeah, McMillan, I couldn't because I didn't just see enough. I didn't go back through later when he was healthy, so I couldn't. Okay. But I think he needs to get stronger, as if I had to pick a hole in McMillan. But Polk, he is almost too casual at times for me.
Okay.
Not that he's not going to be a really good receiver, but it almost looks like it just needs to get a little sense of urgency in his game at times. Reminded me a little bit of, and I remember watching him play live twice, Romeo Doubs from Nevada.
Yeah.
Or Utah State. I think it was Utah State.
No, you're right. Nevada. He played with Carson Strong.
Yeah. Yeah. With Carson. Yeah. And he was very smooth, but it almost looked like too casual or too blasé or whatever the term would be. But I think he's very talented. But his ability to torque and make some contested catches and adjust the way he does reminded me of Romeo Doubs a little bit.
Okay. I actually don't hate that. You're pretty good at this comp thing. All right. So those are our tiered wide receivers. The smart folks on this podcast have Marvin, Malik, and Rome in one tier. The other person just has Marvin, but I don't think we're debating that Marvin's going to be the first wide receiver drafted. Rick, how surprised would you be if say Malik Nabers is drafted first?
Very.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know where I am on that. All right, let's talk about some sleepers real quick. And Rick, I'll give you the floor. I saw your list there, and I like the name because we started talking him up right around the Senior Bowl. Didn't have a drop at all last season. Had some drops at the Senior Bowl. I think he had a drop or two at the combine, but at the end of the day, I don't know if that necessarily matters. Who's your guy?
Marcus Rosemay St. Jack, the unknown receiver out of the University of Georgia. And I liked his ability to torque his body to make adjusted throws. I don't know if he ran at Georgia Pro Day. I know he didn't run at the Senior Bowl, which is or at the Combine, which is starting to irritate me unless he has some kind of injury. But
Rick, I can tell you he did not run at the Georgia Pro Day, at least of the numbers I have.
Did he do did he work out?
It looks like he didn't.
So maybe he's still injured. Hopefully he'll run before before the draft. But I thought this guy had some unique playmaking ability, just under the radar guy. Reminded me a little bit of Wicks, who came out of Virginia. That was my comp when I saw him in the fall. And then the other guy that popped into my head a little bit was that those guys Wicks wasn't fast.
No, he ran the 4.6s, I believe.
Yeah. And then you remember the kid that came out of Wisconsin? Now I know he got in trouble for the gambling. But Quintez Cephas.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Reminded me a little bit of him. Those guys that are maybe leaning more towards possession at speed, but have ability to adjust and have really strong hands. I thought this kid had that.
I should also clarify, because I know you're a good Catholic and you want to call him Marcus Rosemay St. Jack. It's Jack Saint.
Jack Saint.
Yeah. You're the only saint on this podcast, Rick. Josh, do you have a sleeper?
I do. I went with Louisville wide receiver Jamari Thrash. He transferred from Georgia State. Almost 6 foot, 188. Good body control down the field. Savvy route runner. Needs to get a little bit stronger, but been a consistent producer the past 2 or 3 years at multiple different spots. I think the fact that he was able to go to Louisville and not see a dip in production says a lot about his ability to adapt to new situations. So Jamari Thrash is somebody that was on my radar before the year, and I still like him after the 2023 season.
What's the draft range? Just day 3, probably, like early day 3?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going with a Pittsburgh wide receiver.
Of course.
I was actually surprised because, once you start going through the combine guys and you just get in a groove or you're just watching guys and you see the same old stuff and then someone pops across your screen and you take notice. Bub Means, who, let's see what he weighed in at and measured. 6'1", 212, huge hands, ran a 4.43. I didn't think he played that fast. He had a 39.5-inch vertical. When I watched him play, big target, big catch radius, good hands away from his body, can go up and get the ball over defensive backs, and has the size, frame, and athleticism. But I noted that he's a long strider with not much of in terms of separation, but again, showed those good hands. Probably needed to be a little bit more precise as a route runner. And those numbers, the combine numbers and the fast 40 time that didn't necessarily translate, reminded me a lot of A.T. Perry coming out of Wake. But I think Bub Means has a chance to be a day 3 guy who can come in and be that possession receiver type. And we saw A.T. Perry have some success early on as a rookie, just strictly going up and what's the word? Jordan, Randy Mossing guys. God, I always get that wrong. So Bub Means was my Puka Spielman category under the radar greatness.
So you're saying he's going to be Randy Moss. Great. Well, you always say, Debo, clip that and put it out there on social media.
Oh, man. Rick must have got beaten at pickleball this morning because he is grumpy. Hey, Rick, there's always tomorrow. And I'll tell you, like, when I used to play pickup basketball in college and I was playing against the college point guard who threw my layup out of bounds, don't get mad. Get better. That'd be my advice. Nothing more humiliating than having that happen to you. All right. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to look at Rick's top 10 wide receivers in the last 5 drafts right after this.
The blackout mystery remains.
Welcome to March Madness. Oh! You just never know in the tournament who is going to shine.
Stream March Madness live on any device, anywhere, and be ready for anything.
All right, Rick, let's do a top 10 wide receiver prospects of the past 5 classes. I don't know if Tebow's going to throw the list up, but the big shocker, of course, is that Marvin Harrison Jr. is number 1. I was thinking if we went back to 1997, Rick, which is Randy Moss draft, and just disregarding the off-field concerns or whatever, is Marvin ahead of Randy Moss, or is that the far as back as you have to go to get someone who's challenging Marvin?
Yeah, but Randy Moss dropped just because he ended up transferring 62 times, ended up in Marshall.
Yeah.
And Marvin Harrison, to me, is just a little bit smoother, a route runner, not the same vertical speed that Randy Moss was. And Randy's a Hall of Famer because of that vertical speed and his ability to go up and make big plays down the field. But I think Marvin's a little bit smoother on in-breaking routes or routes that require the receiver to come back to the quarterback, curls, option type routes, things like that.
Oh, another name, 2005, I think, was draft class. Megatron, Calvin Johnson, or Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Ooh, that's pretty good. I'm going to go with Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm going to stick with my guns and go with Marvin Harrison Jr.
How about I'm going to toss out, I think, one of the most polished wide receivers.
Do not say Jalen Reagor.
Coming out of college, Larry Fitzgerald.
That's my comp, but everybody already uses my comps.
Josh stole it. Who are you taking?
Marvin Harrison Jr.
I think
Keyshawn,
it's like Caleb.
I believe the last wide receiver to go number 1 in 96, Keyshawn
right.
Johnson.
Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm sticking to my guns.
I think in terms of the list we just came up with, I think Keyshawn probably goes after Randy, Larry, and Megatron on that list.
Remember, Megatron was in
that weird offense.
Yeah, at Georgia Tech.
I think they played the triple option then. Is it Paul Johnson maybe?
Yeah.
Is that right? So, yeah, you had to do a little projecting, but all you had to do was watch him run the 4.3 at 6'5" and whatever he was. You're like, oh, okay, that might work out. All right, Marvin Harrison Jr., he's sticking to his guns. This is like the Caleb Williams is better than every quarterback ever situation, even John
Charles
Elway.
Rogers? I'm just trying to think. He was a top 3 pick. I know he didn't pan out, but
yeah,
receivers that went top.
Don't ask anymore, Debo. Marvin Harrison Jr. You can throw out Lance Allworth. Marvin Harrison Jr.
Number 19. Was he number 19?
Were you scouting Mississippi Valley State?
Oh, yeah, Jerry Rice.
Marvin Harrison Jr.
That was before your time. All right. Next up, number 2. Jamar Chase. So was Jamar the same draft as Justin? Are we learning something about how they had their draft board stacked here? Not the same draft, Josh?
No.
Oh, dang it.
CD Lamb.
Oh, okay. Oh, there it is. Well done, Rick. You thought ahead. You got me on that one. Okay, so Jamar Chase was the next draft class?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, gosh, this all running together. I apologize. So Jamar Chase, that ended up being the right pick for the Bengals because the conversation then was just they take Jamar Penei Sewell. Penei's been fantastic for Detroit, but I think you would agree, Rick, that Jamar was best case for Cincinnati, even though Joe Burrow continues to take a beating.
Yes. Yeah, no. He's premier receiver in this league. And you remember, he still went there, even though he didn't play. I think that was a COVID year, the year he came out, and ended up not playing that year.
Absolutely. In fact, our Dennis Dodd broke the story that he was taking the COVID year because I think he had said previously that Jamar had said he planned on playing that year, and then he didn't, and it did not matter. I'm sure Rick was super pumped that he didn't compete when he had an opportunity to. Next up, Justin Jefferson. That worked out pretty good. The 5th wide receiver taken in that draft. In fact, Rick, I should tell folks who are watching perhaps relatively recently, you can go back and search on the YouTube machine, Rick Spielman, Justin Jefferson, and you can find out the story about how this came to be. He talked about it in Rick's picks early on in the with the first pick journey. Number 4, Malik Nabers. Explain that one.
What am I explaining? You guys like Malik Nabers?
The head of CD, Garrett, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith.
Yeah, I know. I really like this kid. I think he's going to be a very explosive playmaker at the next level. I like his downfield speed. Every time he gets in the balls in his hands, I think he can make an explosive play. He can take it the distance. Anytime he gets space, he can outrun angles. Now, he better work out at the LSU Pro Day or this list may change. But I think compared to CD Lamb, we're going off of when they came out of college. Remember that. and I put Malik ahead of CD when CD came out of Oklahoma.
Right. To reiterate, this is just how Rick had these guys graded coming out of college, not anything they've since done in the NFL. So CD at 5, and then Garrett Wilson at 6. Then Roman Odunze and Brian Thomas Jr. both ahead of Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith. Is that solely size related?
Size and speed. Although Odunze wasn't, but Odunze so physical and he can go up and get the ball. And like I said, maybe the biggest jump, and I love his competitiveness out of all of these guys. He is one of the most competitive guys on this list. I think Brian Thomas Jr. has the upside and the size and the speed. That's why I just notched him ahead of Waddle and Devonta Smith because they were smaller.
Ryan, I think it's interesting. Oh, yeah. I was just going to say CD Lamb 17th in his draft. Now these are different draft classes, but Jalen Waddle down there at 9 went number 6, right after Jamar Chase. Devonta Smith was 10. Garrett Wilson was also 10. So just funny how these different draft classes stack up. We know how last year went, waiting until pick 20, and Rick bumped a couple guys off his list, but Lamb is up there pretty high.
Is there a theme here? Guys that have size usually end up being pretty good receivers in this league.
And I'm actually looking at your we see the top 10 here, and then next on the list as we go through it, and there you can see it. Keon's big, AD Mitchell's big, Quentin Johnston was big, and Quentin Johnston's the first wide receiver from last year's draft class, unless I missed one that you have. And did you fall in love with the size, or he just has yet to tap into the potential that we saw?
I think he'll be better than this year. I think he was playing by the numbers when we broke him down during the season, and he got a little better. I think he still has upside and is going to get better. So
I had talked myself during the T. Higgins draft. I said, oh, he's too stiff. He's probably not a first-round pick. He played pretty well in that offense. And you just said you're a big wide receiver guy. Why do you have T behind Jahan Dotson?
I thought Jahan Dotson was a significant playmaker coming out of Penn State, and I didn't see T. Higgins play live, but I did see Dotson. And I saw him take over a game in Maryland when he came out, and I just thought he was a unique playmaker for his size at Penn State, especially Debo with the type of quarterbacks that you guys produce out of that program. He really covered up a lot of mistakes.
A lot of warts. Don't worry, Drew Aller's going to be the guy this year. They're going to let him throw the ball 5 times in a game. Hey, and finally, Jack Smith and Jigba is the honorable mention list. Josh, any names stick out on that list as too high, too low?
No, I thought what was interesting when you look at the top 10 list, 4 LSU Tigers there, 2 Ohio State Buckeyes, 2 Alabama Crimson Tide. You think recruiting rankings matter? You think the talent coming out of high school translates to the next level? I think that list is a pretty good indication that it does.
That's a good point.
And that and you do side jobs for some of those schools.
Josh was with us at the Kentucky Pro Day last year. Who was the wide receiver that almost took us out? Was that Tavion?
No, last year
we almost got hit on an out route, Rick. We weren't paying attention, and Josh's quick feet and fluid hips allowed him to avoid getting smashed on the sideline.
Probably because of Will Levis's 90-mile-an-hour fastball going 22 feet above the receiver's head.
I didn't want to say that. All right. That's it. Thanks for joining us, Josh. Your list was chef's kiss, as the kids say. Rick?
I am looking forward to your and Rick's bracket special for tomorrow. I'm going to be tuning into that on the With the First Pick podcast feed to check out what you guys are saying about the bracket tomorrow. Curious to see who Rick has winning it all this year.
Yeah, I don't even know who's in the bracket. Rick, give us your prediction who wins the men's and the women's college basketball, and we'll get out of here.
I'm going to go with Iowa for the women's side. I think they will upset South Carolina.
Oh, okay.
I watch the women's basketball.
Yeah, you actually do know that.
Yeah. So, and then how can you bet against Villanova right now?
Not in the tournament.
What am I thinking of, Debo?
I imagine you're thinking of the UConn Huskies.
No.
On the men's or women's side?
Huh?
On the men's or the women's side?
The men's side.
Hey, Rick.
Yeah, UConn's number 1.
Rolly Massimino not coaching anymore.
R.I.P. Rolly.
I went with a Philadelphia connection for you, Debo.
Yeah, no ties this year.
By the way, Rick, you sounded like such an authority when you're talking about the women's, and then you went to Villanova and totally blew all credibility this podcast had.
Hey, Rick, Marvin or Braylon Edwards?
Marvin.
Oh.
Marvin. I'm not leaving Marvin.
Andre Johnson.
Oh. Oh.
Irving
God.
Fryer.
Marvin.
You drafted Irving. Were you there when you drafted Irving?
I just needed that for social. Thank you.
All right, Rick, quickly make a men's pick unless you want you're done.
Okay. I am going to go with. You ready for this? Can I just pick an underdog?
Yeah, of course. It's your moment. You
Make
can pick
sure they're in
whoever
the
you want.
tournament.
Huh?
Yeah, make sure they're in the tournament, but you can pick any team you want in the tournament.
I am going to go with Baylor.
Okay. Does that sound? Is that an underdog, Debo or Josh? I don't know.
It's fine. It's a 3 seed.
Okay.
I'll take it. They're in the dance, so we'll count
They're
it.
in the dance. All right, there you got it. So you have Iowa on the women's side and Baylor on the men's side. Bet the house because you're going to win. Rick Spielman.
Dollar bet.
Dollar bet. All right. That's it. Episode 135 in the books. Thanks as always to our guy Josh for joining us. Fun as always. Talk wide receivers. In the feed, you can see the quarterbacks with Brady, running backs with Emory. And we'll be back later this week to do a mock draft on Wednesday. CBS Sports Network, 2 p.m. Eastern. Check that out if you are so inclined. In the meantime, thanks to Josh. Thanks to my guy Rick. Thanks to Debo for producing. Thanks to all you guys who watch, listen, and comment. We'll see you guys on Wednesday.